This is my second time recording this video, so let's hope we can do it. But hello, welcome. I haven't done one of these reading wrap-up videos in a long time. I think the last one was in October, maybe. I feel like, I don't know, the past few months I feel like I've been in a little bit of a reading slump, maybe even a little bit of a life slump, as you can see from my last video. In November, I was super busy, didn't really read. December, the holidays, you know, life gets ahead of you. And then January hit me like a truck. So we won't talk about that. Well, we will, because I'm going to be wrapping up my January books. But February, I feel like, really has been the start of me getting back into feeling like I'm in a groove again, which has been really nice. And yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about the books that I've read so far in 2025. All of my November and December books I did technically wrap up in my tier ranking video for 2024. So if you're interested, go watch that. I read 5 books in January and then 10 books in February, which, like, I'll get into it. It's not that impressive, but that is technically the most I've ever read in a month since I've been back on my, like, reading journey again. So that's fun, and I'm excited to talk to you about those books. Let's get into it. Also, we're joined by a little friend today. It's not going to focus, but... Whoa. Hold on. CPR. Y'all don't want to see how I rigged this bad boy up. Anyways, let's get into the books that I read in January. The first book that I read, drumroll please, was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I think that's what her name is. I don't have the book. Got that one from the library. Shout out. But this is a gothic romance fantasy book. In this book, this kingdom is cloaked with this mist, this evil mist, where if you go into the mist, you either die or you become infected with magic. And actually, the kingdom outlaws people who are infected with magic. So it's basically a death sentence no matter what. They don't want magic happening in this kingdom, but they do have this deck of cards, these cards of power that mainly the nobles and, like, the elites have, because they're very rare, very coveted, very powerful if you own them. They're kind of like a tarot card deck where each card has, like, an individual power, individual kind of character that the person who has it can kind of take on and use either for themselves or for the people. The main character of this book is Elspeth, which I think is like Elizabeth. I'm not really sure. The names in this book are crazy. You're following Elspeth, who is an infected person. So she's kind of, like, secretly going through life as an infected person. Like, you're not supposed to be infected. That's against the law. You're following her, and her magic is, because each infected person has magic, her magic is that she has this dark monster entity being in her mind and in her body. It's starting to kind of take over her and her life, and it's not a good situation. It's called the Nightmare. So I wouldn't want to have the nightmare living in me either. So she goes on this quest with this man named Raven with a Y. Couldn't we just have used an E? Why did we use the Y? Silly little romance fantasy books. She goes on this quest with Raven because they are going to try and collect these cards, this deck of cards, because by bringing them all together, they can, 1, get rid of the mist that is looming over their kingdom, and 2, stop this, like, magic monster from taking over Elspeth, and also just helping all of the rest of the infected people who are secretly living in the kingdom, because she's not the only one. I honestly can't remember. This might be an enemies to lovers, but it is a romance. So you see them going on this quest. You see them falling in love. And it's pretty fun. I immediately after finishing this one, I read 2 Twisted Crowns, which is the second book in this duology, which is so nice because everything wraps up in 2 little books. I do have some issues. It's not my favorite fantasy series I've ever read. The books are still really, really fun. I am obsessed with the magic system. Like, oh my god. I was so obsessed to the point where I was looking up fan art, which is, like, not something that I do. I am not a fan art person, but I was deep in the internet looking at fan art for this book. Really, my favorite part about these books was the magic system. Everything else was not all that great. Like, the plot was supposed to be really high stakes, and I don't know, it was the pacing. I think it maybe made it a little bit less high stake. Like, I still flew through the first book. The second book was definitely slower paced, but yeah, I was just thinking that I was gonna like this series more. Going into it, I've been told that this is like a dark, gothic romance fantasy, and honestly, aside from the few mentions of the mist, I feel like the setting was a little bit lackluster, just from like how much it's hyped up on the internet. Also, I found the characters to be really one-dimensional. So forgettable, which is a shame because I loved seeing their like relationship grow together. But really, the only character development you get from these people, the only information that you're learning about them is stuff to drive the plot forward. And like I said, the plot is already kind of not all that. So it was a weird situation while I was reading this. I was like, I don't know anything about these people apart from the plot, which is fine. Like, it was still a fun read. Sometimes these like super popular romance fantasy books, like, you can't get everything all in one. The first book, so fun. I was like predicting stuff left and right. I was taking notes because I was like, ooh, this is fun and silly. And then by the end I was like, wait a minute, nothing really happened. The second book is different from the first book, where in the first book you're following one perspective. In the second book you're following three. And while that was really fun, I liked the introduction of the new POVs. You do get even less and less from the main characters in the first book, which like you already didn't have a whole lot of. So I was like, dang, we kind of forgot about them. So I wasn't taking notes on that one because I was not as invested. It's a good series if you want to get like a quick little duology done. The magic system was so good. The magic system alone is enough that you should read it. Everything else, kind of not my most favorite thing I've ever read. I'm very glad that I read those because they've just been so hyped and I've been so intrigued by them for the longest time. And I finally read them and I was like, perfect. Got that one off the list. And then the next book that I read, I'm in a book club with my friends from college. So I read Bright I Burn by Molly Atkin. I'm not 100% sure how to say her name. I didn't read this physically. Like, I have the book because my friend sent it to me after she was done with it, but I listened to all of it on audiobook, which, just starting off, I think that if you read it versus listen to it, you're going to have a completely different experience. The narrator is Irish. This is an Irish book. I'll get into the synopsis in a second because I need to read it to you in order for me to have like a full picture of this book. I listened to it and it was a totally different experience than I think if you read it, so just know that going into it. Here's what this is about. It is a fierce, electrifying novel of power, patriarchy, and sexuality inspired by the true story of the first woman in Ireland to be condemned as a witch. That was like the reason that we all wanted to read it. We were like, oh, the first witch of Ireland? Hell yeah. So, in the 13th century, a woman with power is a woman to be feared. Alice, the daughter of the wealthy innkeeper in Kilkenny, grows up watching her mother wither under the constraints of family responsibilities, and she vows that she will never suffer the same fate. In time, she discovers she has a flair for making money and takes her father's flourishing business to new heights. But as her riches and stature grow, so too do rumors about her private life. By the time she marries her fourth husband, the previous three have died, a storm of local gossip and resentment culminates in a life-threatening accusation. ... A breathtaking act of imagination, Bright I Burn gives voice to a woman lost to history who dared to carve out a space of her own in a man's world. This is a historical fiction about a real-life woman, which I don't know why, but I guess I didn't really realize that until the end. Like, she actually existed, but yeah, she was the first woman to be accused of witchcraft in Ireland, which is just so sick. This is a really interesting book in the way that it was written. It's kind of written like old-timey, honestly. Like, it's almost like they used 1300s language, but like a little bit easier to read. The main character is this like super strong, cunning woman who just like knows what she wants. She wants money. She wants a life with her family. She wants a lot of sex. Like, holy cow. and she gets what she wants. So people are afraid of her, which is just like so crazy. The stuff that was happening in this book, I was like, oh my god, I would not be alive if I were a woman living in this time. Like, holy cow, could not put up with a lot of this stuff. I listened to this, like I said, and I like, at some points I regret doing that because I feel like I wasn't very connected to the characters of the story. It was very choppy, which I think is also the same in here. But if you're reading it, I feel like you might have a more like well-rounded view of everything that's happening, because I feel like these are written kind of like diary entries almost. And when you're listening to diary entries being told, I'm like, whoa, like whiplash back and forth. So that was a little bit difficult for me to like kind of grasp. And also it's kind of like a forgettable story because I didn't read it. I couldn't really tell you what goes on in this book other than like a few things, unfortunately. But I did really like the audiobook because, like I said, the narrator was Irish, so she had an Irish accent, and she would like sing the Irish songs that were in here, which was amazing. I loved that. But yeah, it didn't really have a lasting effect on me, unfortunately. I do think that I should read it again at some point now that I have this book. Thank you, Papa. This is a Papa appreciation channel, because we would not be having him today or this book today without Papa, so everyone give a big smooch to Papa. I would recommend this to people who like a sort of witchy, whimsical, cunning woman story. I definitely would recommend this to you because it was good, but then also I'm just like, it was good in the moment, and then after that moment passes, I just don't really think about it. I feel like this is a great time to read this if you want to get in the spirit for St. Patrick's Day or something. The next book that I read was All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. I have had this book on my shelf, on my TBR shelf, for years. And I was finally tired of looking at it. I think I didn't read it for so long because the ending was spoiled for me. I don't know how. How did that happen? But the ending is like kind of crazy and like, yeah. So that was like a big deterring point for me, so I didn't read it for so long. But I'm really glad that I finally did. I'm glad to have it off my shelf, and it was also just really enjoyable, honestly. I read it in, I think, a day or two. This is like a YA romance book, romance fiction sort of thing. And I feel like YA books are just so incredibly readable. Like, they're just so bingeable, obviously because they're written for a younger audience, but they're just so, I love them. They're so easy to read and they go by so quick. This book is about Violet and Finch, who are two high schoolers, and they meet one day up on the ledge of their school's bell tower because they're both considering jumping. Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. They're both going through some really difficult personal struggles. Violet is mourning the loss of her older sister, and Finch is going through a lot of issues with his family, but also with his mental health, trying to navigate that by himself as a young teen. They end up talking, and they both end up backing down from the ledge. And this is their first time meeting, even though they both go to the same school. Violet, before her sister died, was a really popular girl, and Finch was like this notorious bad boy. Like, he is always getting into trouble, always doing crazy stuff. So they ran in definitely very different circles, but after this first meeting, they keep on interacting after that, and they end up having to do a school project together where they need to explore different areas in their state in Indiana. And it's so sweet, it's so wholesome. It's them kind of discovering like the joy of everyday life again, I guess, together, and they start to fall in love. It's super sweet. This book definitely covers a lot of really heavy topics, as you can tell from literally the first chapter of the book when they're both thinking about jumping. It gets to be really sad, so warning before you read this. But I will say I really liked it. Some of the representation of mental illness in this was like not perfect, but I feel like for a young adult novel, it's okay. I read this in, I think, 2 days. If you're interested in reading a little YA romance that talks about heavier topics, I definitely think you should pick this one up. I think it was fun. It was sweet, but it was sad. If you're looking for a sad book, this is also your go-to. It says that this is a Netflix film, and I don't know if I'm gonna watch that, honestly, because I feel like Netflix high school stuff is like weird for me. But yeah, I'm really glad that I finally read that, and I ended up liking it so much more than I thought I was going to, which is always nice. The next book that I read in January, I think this is the last one I read in January, Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. This is a contemporary romance book set in New York City, which I love anything set in New York City. Like, I'll read anything set in New York. You're following this girl, I forget what her name is. I don't remember what her name is. That's probably not good. You're following the female main character who is a violinist at this popular orchestra in Manhattan, and she's a really talented musician, but she didn't really go the traditional route of learning how to play a musical instrument, of like going to college to study it and then joining an orchestra. She just did that straight out of high school just because of some stuff that was happening when she was growing up. One day she's offered the role of first violin, which is like a really big deal in the orchestra. If you don't know anything about kind of like orchestra dynamics, you'll definitely learn about it in this book. But basically, the head honcho is like the conductor, and then right under them is the first violin. And so she gets offered this really, really, really prestigious position kind of out of the blue. Like, it's like, she's talented, but it's also like, why did you get offered this? That brings her to the attention of the male main character, who is a cellist in the same orchestra. And he's like, what the heck? I've been working my entire life to get this position that this girl got, and she got it over me. And so he just becomes like obsessed with her, finding out about her and also about the way that she plays music, because it's so different to the style that he plays, I guess. And yeah, they start seeing each other a lot more, start hanging out. You know how it goes. It's a fun little romance. I really did like seeing their relationship progress all the way up until the third act breakup. That was where it started to lose me a little bit. I don't love the kind of formulaic contemporary romances that are like, meet cute, fall in love, third act breakup, get back together. I don't love contemporary romances that do that. So when I was going into this, I wasn't expecting to love it. And while I was reading it, I was like, whoa, this is actually good. And that third act breakup came around, and I was like, oh shit, they got me again. The resolution, you know, there are some things that I was like kind of picky about, the third act breakup and onward being one of them. Also, I'm just going to throw this in here because I found this to be so silly. At one point, there's a scene where the female main character is wearing stockings, and you know, that's something you have to maneuver around when you're, you know. And then later on, like a few hours late, or like an hour later, she's just magically not wearing stockings anymore. What? How does that work? I feel like some proofreading needed to be done here. I was like, whoa, did you forget that she was wearing stockings? Like, I feel like that's an important part to a little orchestra outfit. That was kind of funny to me. Another scene that was like really piqued my attention, which I think you can glean from the cover. There's like a little bit of a ghost with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore scene where they're like making pottery together. It's kind of that. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy, but like, I'm kind of loving it. I'm a kind of a notorious smut spice hater, but this was actually done really well. So, or at least like fun. I wasn't completely cringed out, except for, yeah, anyways, I don't need to be rambling about every single critique that I have about this one. But yeah, it was fun all the way up till the ending, I think, and then it kind of lost me. But still, I love books set in New York City. I think that it was really fun that they were both musicians, because that's a slay. I feel like you would like this if you like musician stories, if you like kind of high stakes musical tension, I guess. I feel like that's a very niche audience because I thought that was fun, but maybe you won't think that's fun. Going into February, the first book that I read was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I feel like this book was made for me. Not to be dramatic, but also like kind of not. We'll get into it. This book is about Emily Wilde, who is a scientist at Oxford. I think that's what she is. But she studies fairies for a living, which is so cool. In this world, fairies are living on every continent. Maybe in this world too. You never know. She's studying fairies and she's writing this encyclopedia about fairies across the globe, as you can maybe tell from the title. But in order to finish her final chapter, she travels to this country that is basically Iceland. I forget what they call it in the book, but it's Iceland. It's literally Iceland. I don't know why she didn't call it Iceland, because I think England also exists in their world. But yeah, it's literally Iceland, which if you know me and Iceland will go way back. We go way back. No, I'm just kidding. But I love Iceland, and I spent a summer there a few years ago now, I guess. She goes to this fake Iceland country to study their different types of fairies, their fae. And this book is written in like a scientific journal sort of style, which is fun. Like it's a step above a diary where she's keeping like field notes and stuff like that. And this character, Emily Wilde, is kind of, I don't know, I feel like you could say she's neurodivergent. She doesn't really understand social cues. She really just likes to be alone or with her dog, studying the fairies, doing research instead of like hanging out with other people. She is, you know, going about her routine, studying these people, talking to some villagers as well. And her academic rival comes, and he is like, hey, guess what? I'm going to help you with this project, and we're going to do some work together. And so he kind of takes over her whole situation where she's staying and is really like butting his nose into all of her work. They start meeting more fae together and doing some crazy adventures out into the Icelandic country. This is such like a wintry book. Lots of snow, lots of ice, and a little bit of romance, which is always fun. As much as I really ended up liking this book, the first half dragged on so much that I almost DNF'd it. Like I just about DNF'd it right when it was getting good. The way that it is written, like I said earlier, it's very like scientific field note style, which I like because, you know, I'm a woman in STEM too. But I honestly feel like it was like overwritten a little bit. Like the style, it was just doing a little bit too much until the plot started to pick up. And then it was like, oh my god, I needed to keep reading and keep reading and keep reading. Like it was unputdownable. First half, didn't love, but I also could think it's just like me needing to get used to the writing style and all that. Once I really got into the book, it was just so good. I just picked up the second book in the series, so I'm really excited to read that. I'm not sure what season that one is set in, so I need to do some research about when I should read it, because I read this one in February because I wanted to read it while it was like cold and snowy, because we got a lot of snow at the beginning of February. So I want to keep that vibe going, of going with the seasons. Hopefully it's not in winter again, because we're manifesting spring around here. The next book that I read in February was A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock. This one I picked up because I randomly saw it in a bookstore in Colorado one time. And I was like, ooh, this sounds really good, because I really like horticultural stuff. And I think the way that this was marketed was like a botanical Frankenstein, which is like what happens. But I was like, ooh, this is cool. But I didn't end up buying it for whatever reason. It finally came onto the Libby app with my library, and I was like, you know what? We're just going to read this. So I read it. Again, not my most favorite book I've ever read. But basically, this book is about these two Victorian gentlemen who are living in this greenhouse, which is like amazing. I would love to do that. And they are just trying to be secretive, trying to keep their relationship private, if you know what I mean. One of them is a taxidermist and the other one is a botanist. And one day the botanist gets this package of this really interesting species that's like a living fungus, which they end up turning into a botanical daughter, where they're turning plants into essentially a human being, which was really cool. But I didn't love this book, which is so sad because the premise is amazing. It lost me in the execution. I really liked the writing style because, you know, it's very flowery, considering that they live in a greenhouse. I liked the characters, but I said this in my last video, which was a vlog, when I was reading this. While I liked the characters, they, again, were kind of one-dimensional. You would get little snippets of them, of their background, and you'd be like, ooh, this is interesting. Why don't we go into this? And then they just wouldn't. And the thing that was really explained about them, and was like the thing that was developing throughout the story, was like their sexuality, which is fine. I'm all about reading about queer characters, but the only additional information that we got from them, the only way that they were like progressing, was them kind of like coming out to you as the reader. And I don't know, the way that the blurb is structured, you can already guess that they're all gay. Like, you already know that. Additionally, it is marketed as a horror book. There was maybe 2 scenes where it was like a little bit gruesome, just a teeny tiny bit. Also, the plot, it was almost like there was no plot, even though it was like a really high stakes situation. Like, you're making a Frankenstein plant, like that is crazy, and you're trying to keep it a secret from everyone, but then like nothing happened for so much of the book, and I was just waiting for the shoe to drop, and it didn't really ever. Towards the end, like, something big happens, but I was just waiting for there to be higher stakes throughout the book, and there really just wasn't. So it was kind of like a chore trying to read it. It really fell flat for me, which is so sad because the premise was so promising. Really sad that I didn't like it, but I'm really glad that I read it because I'd been thinking about it for so long after seeing it that one time in a bookstore. I don't know if I would recommend this one. I would recommend this if you like sort of botanical writing and you don't mind a slow-paced book that doesn't really do anything or say anything. Unfortunately, I got interrupted, so sorry for the lighting and the angle changes. I am so excited to talk to you about what I read next. I read the 5 volumes that are out in the Heartstopper series, which is not something that I ever thought I was ever gonna read, to be honest. I randomly picked up the first book because I was at the library with my mom and she was looking through magazines. I just picked up something quick that I was like, I don't know how long she's gonna be here looking at magazines, so why don't I just grab something randomly? And then I was like, okay, graphic novel could be interesting because I have not read those, I think probably since middle school. I looked through all the adult ones, wasn't really vibing, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, what is one young adult graphic novel series that is crazy popular? Heartstopper. So sat down while my mom was reading her magazines and I read the first volume of Heartstopper in one sitting, and it was amazing. Like, I expected them to be good because they have such like a cult following, or not even like cult following, but like they're so popular. The TV show was made out of it. Everyone loves them, everyone raves about them. And I never really like thought that I would be interested because it's a YA graphic novel. Like, I feel like I kind of gone past that in my life, but no, this was amazing. The first book has this feeling about it of like first love, crushes, and yearning that is just so strong and so well done. Even if this was like a book, like written words, this would still be amazing. And the fact that it has images that are just so good too, like, it's amazing. This book and this whole series is about Nick and Charlie, who are 2 British high schoolers, which I didn't know they were going to be British. Pleasant surprise. 2 British high schoolers. Charlie is this younger boy who is openly gay. He was bullied a lot in the past for being gay, so he has a lot of like trauma associated with that. And the second main character is Nick, who is this older student. He's a rugby player. He's just like stereotypical jock. Super nice guy though, golden retriever energy for sure. They randomly get assigned seats next to each other in this like homeroom sort of class, and they really hit it off. Their friendship develops into crushes and then develops you know, develops into 5 more books. So you know where this is going. But I thought that the first book was so good. So good. I was literally glued to my seat. Like, my mom had finished her magazines and I had 20 pages left, and I was like, you need to stop. We need to sit. I need to finish this right now. And then I checked out all of the other 4 books at the library, took them all home, read them within 2 days. The first book hooked me like none other. It also ends on a cliffhanger. None of the other books did that, but the first book was just elite, top tier, my first 5-star read of this year. It was so perfect. The rest of the books follow their relationship as they're just going through different struggles in life, struggles that a teenager faces, struggles that queer teenagers face in school. And I think that they're just like perfect representations of what like healthy and communicative relationship looks like, which can be so helpful for young adults, because this is a young adult graphic novel series. I think that if kids were to read this, it would just be so beneficial to them, just to see what like a healthy relationship looks like, and also like a successful queer relationship when you're young. Like, that can be so valuable. They really handle some like serious topics throughout all of them with like such grace too, which is so nice. I'm not gonna like review each individual one because there were 5 books. Each book kind of has like a different storyline that they're following, but it's all about Nick and Charlie. I think that my favorite is obviously the first one. The like relationship development in that one is literally amazing. Like, I felt like I had a crush too while I was reading that. I really liked all of them. I think they were all super good. The first one and the 4th one really stood out to me though. The 4th one, I like cried, which I wasn't expecting at all. I literally was like shedding tears over the story, which is crazy. Like, can't believe a little graphic novel was able to do that to me. I just need to know what happens. The 6th book is not out yet. I think she does release some of the comics on maybe like Tumblr or something, but I feel like I want to wait to read them when they're all out and I can just like binge them. It's gonna break me when this last one comes out, I feel like, because it's gonna be sad when they're done. I want to go back and read some of Alice Oseman's other books, because she has some other books about like the same, like some characters in this universe, and I really like all the side characters that are in these books. And I would like to watch the show too, but I don't know. Again, a little Netflix high school series and movie, like, I feel like I don't love their vibes anymore. I feel like I've outgrown that, so we'll see. Okay, in my haste to talk about the Heartstopper books, I realized I forgot to talk about this little novella that I read, and this one is called The 6 Deaths of the Saint, which is by Alex E. Haro. I was totally influenced by Carrie Can Read. She talked about this book. She said that it was like super good, only 30 pages. So I was like, interesting. And one night I was just looking for something to read on my Kindle, and I saw that this was free through like Prime Reading, which is not something I normally utilize, but maybe I will more because this was so good. It's a free little novella on your Kindle, and I feel like I don't want to tell you what the synopsis is. This is like a fantasy short story, and it was so good. It was so good. I don't want to tell you what the story is just so you can go in blind and like be as shocked as I was. I totally would recommend if you have a Kindle or if you have like an Amazon Prime account, I guess. I feel like I want to read some more by this author too, because I found the writing style to be so good. I don't really know if I would rate a short story, but I feel like it was honestly like a 4 or 5 stars. It was that good. I highly recommend if you're looking for something super quick. Like, I just wanted to read something in bed right before I went to sleep, and this was perfect. And then the last 2 books that I read in February. The other day, I finished Beartown by Frederick Bachman, which is actually one of the 25 books I wanted to read in 2025. So hell yeah, finally read one of those. I've been meaning to read this one for a while just because I discovered Frederick Bachman last year, and he's such a good author. He has such like an interesting and creative writing style where he has this like wit and humor. He writes about really, really serious topics, but in such a way that it's like very, I don't want to say wholesome, but like well-rounded, I guess, and ultimately hopeful and positive. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. You kind of just like gotta read his stuff because it's so good. Beartown is about this town called Beartown. It is this really, really, really small town in the middle of like the Swedish woods. And they're really kind of off the map nowadays. Their economy is declining. Shops are closing. People are moving away. It's kind of like, bear with me here, Beartown. It's kind of like, you know, in Cars, where originally the town Radiator Springs is like poppin'. They've got the interstate going through there. It's super busy town, really great. And then years go on and another highway is built and then no one goes to Radiator Springs anymore. It's kind of like that. Like the people there are really, really close in their community, but there's like slowly being less and less people there, if that makes sense. The one thing that really unites this town is their love for hockey. And this book opens up with the junior hockey team being in the semifinal championship game. They're about to go into this game, which is a huge deal because if they win this championship, that means they could bring like a hockey academy to the town. They could really boost their economy and like really bring a lot of attention to Beartown, which is actively dying, and that would bring more people into this town because if they win, then that's like solidifies them as this really, really, really great hockey town. Fredrik Backman has such like a unique story structure where he follows so many different characters. I've read A Man Called Ove and Anxious People, and he does the same thing in those two books, but in Beartown, it's like another level. There's probably like 30 characters that you just get to know so well. You're following all these different characters, seeing how they interact with each other, how they interact with the town, how they're connected to hockey, how they're not connected to hockey. As you read on, though, something really, really, really traumatic happens to a young girl in the town, and it involves the hockey team. And so you see how this town really values hockey over anything else, which is crazy. Like you see people's morals being exposed in the way that they react to this specific situation. I won't say what it is because first of all, it's triggering. Second of all, it's a spoiler. So if you are someone who needs to look out for content warnings, definitely look into what this book talks about before you read it, because holy cow, it can be really upsetting. You just follow the aftermath of this really traumatic event, how it impacts the town, how it impacts hockey. And yeah, this is the first book in a 3-book series, and I like need to read the second 2 books. I know that they're gonna hurt like a bitch because I think I already know what's gonna happen in the last book just because I've seen so many people online read this book and like react to it, so I have some guesses as to what's gonna happen. Unfortunately, I would recommend this. There's a lot of really upsetting parts about this book, and I really hope in the next few books there is like some serious repercussions for what happens in this, because if there's not, I'm gonna be like really upset. But I'm just really hoping that there's more talk about like the negative impacts of trauma and how to kind of be better people. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to spoil this book for you, but yeah, I'm just hoping that there's some more development within the town and the people in the next few books. We'll see. I know that this is some people's like favorite series of all time. I have high hopes for the next 2, but the first one was really good. It's just hard. It's a hard book to read for sure. Like I said earlier, I've read 2 other books by Fredrik Backman. In those 2 books, he has such like a humorous way of telling the story, and this one it's like much more serious. So that kind of threw me off going into this one, which like totally makes sense for the subject matter of this book. And like I appreciate that he wasn't hilarious right off the bat, because I feel like that would have totally crushed me going into like the rest of the book. But yeah, it would definitely took some getting used to hit this like different tone. So I'm hoping the next few are kind of easier for me to get into, but we'll see. And then the last book that I read in February is All About Love by Bell Hooks. I picked this up because I watched these two YouTube videos, I think like almost back to back for some reason, and they both reference this book. They're both amazing YouTube videos, by the way. I'll link them down below so you can watch them. They both reference this book, and I was like, should I read this? And so I did. Perfect for Valentine's Day, Valentine's month. This is a feminist philosophy book about love and kind of how this mainly focuses on America, how America is kind of a loveless society nowadays. Like the way that we view love is super skewed, and also the way that there's not a lot of community in most of America is just, it's really kind of detrimental to society and to individuals. I found this to be a really, really, really good book, really an amazing read, super eye-opening, because even in the first few chapters, Bell Hooks defines love, which, if you think about it, have you ever known a definition of love? I know that I haven't, so reading that, I was like, whoa. And it's also different than maybe what you would think as well. It's very precise and doesn't really allow a lot for wiggle room, which I feel like a lot of relationships you may perceive as love like may not even be what love is, depending on like the definition in this book. So that was super like eye-opening for me. Each chapter is this sort of lesson about some sort of love, like commitment, spirituality, greed. I really loved the chapters about greed and community, chapters about loss, healing, stuff like that. I don't know, I thought that this was really good. It's kind of like a memoir mixed in too. So you kind of hear about Bell Hooks's experiences with love throughout like friendships, romantic partners, her family too. It's a really interesting look into what love is and like how our actions should be actions that value love more, or like we should be acting on love sort of thing. I feel like you won't understand what I'm talking about unless you read this book, because I'm definitely not doing a great job of explaining it. But yeah, I found this to be super, super, super good. Towards the end, it started to lose me because it started to reference a lot of like biblical stuff. I really liked her chapter about spirituality, and as a person who is like agnostic or even atheist, normally I have like a negative sort of view on a lot of like religious culture in America specifically, and I really loved her chapter on spirituality because it kind of goes past just religion, but then she started bringing Christianity into the end, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't really resonate with this. There are some things that you can totally take from this book and apply to your life, but then there are some things that you maybe want to leave out of your life, and I feel like that's what I'm going to do with this. I got this from the library, and I think I need to buy this so I can have it at home, so I can like annotate it and underline things and save things, because I was writing down quotes that I really liked from this book, but then it ended up like there were too many things. So I need to end up buying this book at some point. But this was super, super good. Also, I think that this is a perfect time to read this book because in America right now, if you're not in America, I'm so jealous of you. In America right now, we are truly, truly in a loveless society, especially with our government. Holy cow, there is no aspect of love being used when our government is making decisions. It's all about greed, and it's so terrifying. This book really has some great ways of kind of like counteracting that, and how to like not value that in your personal life, which I think is really nice to read about because it is kind of hopeful. There are so many ways that we can change society too. Like, I wish everyone would read this book and kind of think about things a little bit in a more compassionate way for other people. I highly, highly recommend this if you're looking to expand your knowledge on like societal love and community. I think this is so good. So good. It talks about more things too, like romantic love, self-love, familial love, and they're all amazing, super useful. So highly, highly recommend this one. Those are all of the books that I read in January and February. I am so excited for March. I just have a good feeling that springtime is going to bring some good books. I'm so excited. I'll let you know about what I read, hopefully. We'll see if I end up doing monthly reading wrap-ups again, or if I start doing bi-monthly, or maybe like my favorites. I don't know. I'm still figuring this stuff out, you guys. But I wanted to say thank you so much for anyone who watched my last video. I got so many amazing comments and like such supportive comments that I just really, really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you so much for watching this video too. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video, hopefully soon. Bye.